Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and today we're reviewing for you Batman Arkham Trilogy on the Nintendo Switch. This review was originally written by the wonderful PJ O'Reilly and has been adapted for video by me. Very quickly before we get into it, we are reviewing this as a whole, as that is the only way that these games are available on Nintendo Switch. They are not available for individual purchase, so we are treating it as a single package. But anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. When it comes to superhero games, Rocksteady Studios served us up a trio of the very best examples of the genre with its superlative Batman Arkham Trilogy. Whether you prefer the smaller scale and comparative intimacy of Batman Arkham Asylum, the vast open world of Arkham City, or the Batmobile-powered battles of Arkham Knight, there's a lot of top-notch Bat action for Bat fans to dig into throughout this delightfully dark odyssey. We've had our fingers crossed for a long flipping time that at least some of the incredible Arkham games would eventually bat-wing their way onto Switch, and now we've got the entire flipping trilogy to blast our way through. But how do they perform on Nintendo's aging portable machine? Well, as expected, 2009's Arkham Asylum, which debuted on the PS3, plays fairly well. With scaled-back graphics and a 30 FPS target in the mix, it's a solid port that gets the job done, even if it does so with zero panache and a few more stutters and texture pop-in issues than we would have ideally liked. Batman Arkham City, however, provides the biggest positive shock of this package, with much better performance than we anticipated for such a big, busy open world. Yes, it's not perfect, it suffers from its fair share of stutters and some dodgy textures here and there, but it plays well enough that you can get stuck in and enjoy this one without any much in the way of worries beyond some dodgy graphical anomalies and the odd frame rate wobble here and there. Then we move on to the big problem with this collection and the bit where it all went wrong, and the reason why the score at the end of this is so far removed from what we would have loved to have slapped onto a review of some of our favorite action games of the past 20 years. For some absolutely bananas reasons, we've got ourselves a seriously ill-advised port of Arkham Knight to contend with here. There's no getting around it, this is one of the worst port jobs we have ever seen on Switch. It is an unplayable mess that stutters and stops, crashes, and just cannot keep up on a console that isn't capable of dealing with one of 2015's biggest blockbusters in any way whatsoever. It's certainly an odd choice, even if we get it from a completionism point of view, to take something so ill-suited to a particular platform and squeeze it on there however best you can, regardless of the mess you're making. It just boggles the mind. It would have been a much better idea to either run with Asylum and City as a double pack that serves up two basic but functional ports, or go with the underrated Batman Arkham Origins, which PJ says is good, but I can't read that out loud, I'm sorry PJ, as a third game rather than pushing on with this version of Arkham Knight that sullies the entire endeavor. There are always patches and updates, some hope of fixes for some of the more egregious issues in the future, but this third part of Batman's adventure really does feel as though it's beyond saving. It gave monster PCs and next-gen consoles plenty of problems when it was first released, so we can't say we're particularly surprised to see Arkham Knight in a right old state here. It's a real shame, but even with the basic no-frills nature of the Asylum and City ports here, you're still getting two phenomenal games running mostly fine and looking the part in both docked and most especially handheld modes. They're not perfect, but they are very playable, and we'll be replaying both of them from the comfort of our couch in the future, we're sure. However, it would be irresponsible to ignore the fact that a third of this collection is pretty much entirely broken. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, and we would much prefer the option to just pick these games up separately and avoid Night like the plague. Beyond some egregious Switch-specific performance issues, these three games are a well-known quantity, with 2009's Asylum laying the foundations of the series' iconic combat, which combines slick parries, dodges, blocks, and counter-moves into a stylish and super fun combo-based system that makes you feel like the Dark Knight at his most badass. Yes, it really makes you feel like Batman. I added that line in. Add in a novel detective mode that lets you play private investigator whenever you fancy taking a break from kicking the snot out of goons, a stellar voice cast, and we must acknowledge, of course, rest in peace to the forever legend that is Kevin Conroy. Coupled with some of the best writing in the biz, and you're looking at something truly special. Asylum changed the lay of the land for the superhero genre, a genre that wasn't in particularly great shape back in the tail end of the 2000s. Rocksteady delivered a dark and brooding Batman adventure that didn't pull its punches, rolling with a more adult style than many superhero offerings at the time, and giving us a story that took its stylistic cues and voice talent from the incredible Batman the Animated Series. Melding Moorish combat and satisfying detective work whilst also allowing you to go loud or skulk around utilizing perches to clear entire areas without alerting a soul, the only thing this Batman simulator was missing was a world that allowed us to truly take flight. From the Asylum grounds, you can see Gotham lit up like a Christmas tree, and it's the first thing you'll wish for when you set your eyes on it, the ability to take flight above its neon streets. But when you've got a crazed Joker alongside the likes of Harley Quinn, Killer Croc, the Riddler, Scarecrow, and Poison Ivy to deal with on one crazy night, you've probably got more pressing issues. Whilst it doesn't have a great big open world to play around in, Asylum is still our favorite Arkham game of the bunch. It introduced everything that's great about the trilogy, you know, the combat, the dark tone, the endless Riddler puzzles and detective work, whilst also serving up a story that didn't waste any time. Asylum is a tight and taut thrill ride, one of the all-time great superhero games, and over a decade later, it's still a must-play. With Arkham City, Rocksteady allowed players to soar above the streets of Gotham, providing the full Batman experience in an open world that gives you the space and time to observe and prep from range, picking off enemies from the shadows and patrolling the rooftops with a scowl on your face. This was the Batman simulator we'd only dared dream of. Greatly expanded side activities that bring a huge roster of Gotham's finest villains into play, upgraded Riddler challenges, improved and refined combat, and of course, some of the best acting and writing in video games ensured that City was a winner from the off. And with all the previously released DLC in the mix here, this is a game that'll give you countless hours of premium grade bat action all of its own. If we had to pick holes in City, or just explain why Asylum is still our favorite overall of the three, going so big made it a little harder to get gripped by the narrative. There are almost too many distractions at times, and it can feel a little disjointed and diluted as a result. A minor issue in the grand scheme of things, absolutely, but this one takes second place in the story stakes for us, although it does have much improved combat and traversal, so it all balances out nicely in the end. Arkham City can still stand shoulder to shoulder with any modern AAA open world game, and even though you've got to contend with some of the unfortunate stutters from time to time, and it doesn't look nearly as good here as it does on other platforms, this is still the full fat experience running rather well, all things considered. If you've yet to experience this one, it's another must-play. And finally, our least favorite game of the three, Arkham Knight expands further still upon City, a game which was already plenty big enough, thank you, and even though the combat has seen more refinement, we feel like the narrative here was a little bit all over the place, and the Knight himself is a bit of a cringy main villain as well. These slight issues can be overlooked given how much top-notch grappling and gliding there is to dig into here. However, we have to draw the line in the sand at this game's rendition of the Batmobile. We get it, it's very cool to have Bat's signature ride in the game, and ejecting out of it at top speed is fun, and it looks cool, but instead of being used purely as a slick means of traversal and instigating fisticuffs with goons, we've got mandatory tank battles, incredibly dull and repetitive encounters that force you to face off against a bunch of boring metal enemies. Arkham Knight has a weird fascination with all these scraps. We were genuinely surprised by just how many of them there are, not to mention the short car platforming sections in the Riddler's puzzles, and for us it kinda drags down the whole thing. This is easily the most impressive of the three games in many ways, as long as you aren't playing on Switch. But these constant tank fights alongside a comparatively weak villain put this one in last place in the trilogy. It's a real shame to have to mark down such a fantastic collection of games like this, but there's just no escaping the fact that this release feels like a quick and careless rush job in so many ways. There's zero love and care shown to these three games here, and they deserve so so much more. Asylum and City play well enough that Batman fans who have no other choice will still get countless hours of fun regardless of the train wreck that is Arkham Knight, but you're still paying over the odds for two fairly old games that haven't been given any sort of a touch-up in this re-release. We're huge fans of the Arkham Trilogy, and it's fantastic to see the series finally arrive on Switch. It's just a shame that Arkham Knight is in the state that it is here. Rocksteady's phenomenal Arkham series needs no introduction at this stage. Three of the finest superhero games you'll ever play, with a top-notch cast and writing, sublime gameplay that puts you right in the bat boots of the Dark Knight, and so much more besides. Asylum is an all-timer, City still stands up as one of the best open-world games we've ever played, and Knight, although slightly less successful, is a strong final chapter. It's a shame then that Arkham Knight is completely unplayable on Switch. Very little love and care has been shown to any of these games, and better decisions weren't made when it became clear just how poorly one of the games ran here on Nintendo's console. If you only have a Switch and you've never played the first two games, Batman Arkham Trilogy is still a decent way to play those two titles at least. You've reached the end of the review, and that means it's time for Alex's personal thoughts, and oh god. Arkham Asylum looks great and it runs reasonably well. City weirdly runs slightly better than Asylum, and I genuinely have no idea why. But yeah, I can't help but focus on the fact that Arkham Knight runs atrociously. No doubt, as you've seen, I cannot believe the game has been released in this state. It is simply not a finished port. It needs so much more work, it needs so much doing to it, that I just can't see, even with patches and updates, I can't say with confidence that we're going to see this game be playable on Switch anytime in the future. I would love to be proven wrong. I'd love there to be an update that just fixes everything, but I just don't see it happening, and it's incredibly sad. It is such a shame that the first two games aren't available to purchase separately, because that would be an easy recommendation. Yeah, they're not the best ports in the world. They could do with a little bit more polish here and there, and performance isn't ideal, but you know what? It's fine, you know? The games are good enough that they kind of get a pass for that. But you have to buy all three games in order to play the first two, which is, I don't know, it feels very wrong to me. It feels very wrong when the third game is just not in a fit state to force people to buy it, even if they don't want it, but they just want the other two. You know, if it was being sold for, you know, £20 or something like that, I'd say, whatever, you know, sort of just get it. It's still worth it for those two games. But this is £50. That's a lot of money. And I just don't... I'm so sad. I just cannot recommend it right now. It's such a shame. It is such a shame.